One serial killer killed and buried 11 women at the same spot, while another one keeps taunting cops.
You know who I am.
He stated, "You know who I am."
But that's not as crazy as the one who escaped from police custody, never to be seen again. These serial killers are real and are on the loose. Their horrific stories are wild, starting with the West Mesa Bone Collector. The vast, arid landscape of New Mexico's West Mesa conceals a gruesome chapter in American criminal history, one that remains unresolved to this day. On February 2, 2009, a woman walking her dog made a chilling discovery that would unveil one of the most extensive burial sites in the United States. What began with the sighting of a single human bone quickly escalated into a massive excavation, ultimately revealing the remains of 11 women and one unborn child, all buried in shallow graves across the desert terrain. The West Mesa Bone Collector, as this unidentified killer came to be known, is believed to have murdered these victims between 2001 and 2005. Satellite imagery from this period shows disturbing evidence, tire marks, and disturbed soil, suggesting the killer repeatedly returned to this remote location to dispose of victims. By 2005, residential development had begun encroaching on the area, potentially forcing the killer to abandon this burial ground. However, when the housing bubble collapsed in 2008, construction halted, and the site remained undisturbed until flooding and erosion exposed the first human remains. The victims shared striking similarities that painted a clear pattern of targeted predation. Most were young Hispanic women, with one African-American victim, ranging in age from 15 to 32. Many were involved in sex work and struggled with drug addiction, a vulnerable population often overlooked by society and law enforcement. One victim, Michelle Gina Valdez, was 4 months pregnant when she disappeared, adding another layer of tragedy to an already horrific case. The Albuquerque Police Department, APD, has conducted exhaustive investigations over the years, but the killer's identity remains elusive. Two primary persons of interest have emerged: Lorenzo Montoya and Joseph Blee. Montoya lived less than 3 miles from the burial site and had a troubling history of violence against sex workers. In 1998, he was arrested after picking up an undercover detective posing as a prostitute. More tellingly, dirt trails led from his trailer to the burial site, and the pattern of disappearances mysteriously stopped after his death in December 2006. Montoya was killed by the boyfriend of a sex worker he was attempting to murder, and investigators later found a disturbing video in his home that appeared to show him preparing a body for disposal, complete with sounds of tearing duct tape and opening garbage bags. These circumstances have led many, including detectives working the case, to believe that Montoya was indeed the West Mesa Bone Collector. As one Redditor reported in 2024, a detective unofficially suggested that authorities consider the case effectively closed due to the perpetrator's death, strongly implying Montoya's guilt. The second person of interest, Joseph Blee, known as the mid-school rapist, was convicted in 2015 of multiple rapes from the 1980s and 1990s and sentenced to 90 years in prison. His DNA was discovered on a murdered sex worker found on Central Avenue, and investigators found a tree tag from a nursery he frequented near the burial site. When police searched his home, they discovered women's underwear and jewelry that didn't belong to his family. According to reports, Blee allegedly told a cellmate he had hired some of the victims, referring to them as trashy. Despite these suspicious connections, Blee has not been charged with the West Mesa murders, and his attorney vehemently denies his involvement. Other suspects investigated include Fred Reynolds, a pimp who died in 2009 and reportedly knew some of the victims; Ron Irwin, a photographer who was cleared after a search in 2010; and Scott Lee Kimball, a convicted Colorado serial killer who denied involvement when questioned in 2010. Some theories even suggest the murders might be linked to a sex trafficking ring that targeted prostitutes during events like the New Mexico State Fair. The lack of resolution in this case has left families in anguish for nearly 2 decades. In response, the APD continues to offer a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator. As of April 2025, the case officially remains open, with the killer's identity unconfirmed. The I-70 Killer. In the spring of 1992, a chilling pattern of executions terrorized small businesses along Interstate 70, cutting a bloody path through the American Midwest. The I-70 Killer, as this unidentified murderer came to be known, claimed the lives of 6 store clerks across Indiana, Kansas, and Missouri within a mere 29-day period. More than 3 decades later, despite extensive investigation, media coverage, and technological advances, this predator remains unidentified and potentially at large. The killing spree began on April 8, 1992, when 26-year-old Robin Fuldauer was found murdered at the Payless Shoe Source where she worked in Indianapolis. She had been shot twice in the head, and less than $100 was stolen from the register. The store's location near Interstate 465, which intersects with I-70, would prove significant as the pattern unfolded. Just 3 days later, on April 11th, the killer struck again, this time claiming 2 victims in Wichita, Kansas. Patricia Magers, 32, and Patricia Smith, 23, were both shot at La Bride d'Elegance, a bridal shop where they worked. A customer who entered the store was told to go to a back room, narrowly escaping with her life. On April 27th, the killer deviated slightly from his pattern by murdering Michael McCown, 40, at Sylvia's Ceramics in Terre Haute, Indiana. Investigators believe McCown, who had long hair, may have been mistaken for a woman from behind. Like the previous victims, he was shot execution style, and less than $50 was stolen. The final confirmed victims were Nancy Kitzmiller, 24, killed on May 3rd at Boot Village in St. Charles, Missouri, and Sarah Blessing, 37, murdered 4 days later at Store of Many Colors in Raytown, Missouri. These murders shared striking similarities that clearly linked them to a single perpetrator. Each victim was shot in the back of the head with a .22 caliber firearm, identified as likely an Intratec Scorpion or Irma Werke ET-22 pistol. The killer used CCI copper-clad lead bullets with traces of Jeweler's Rouge, a metal polishing compound. This unusual detail suggests the killer may have had access to such materials, possibly indicating a profession or hobby involving metalwork. The victims were predominantly young, petite, brunette women, typically working alone in specialty shops located near interstate exits, details that point to a calculated strategy of target selection. The small amounts of cash stolen, never more than $100, suggest that robbery may have been secondary to the murders themselves. Witness descriptions and composite sketches portray the I-70 killer as a white male, approximately 5 feet 7 to 9 inches tall, in his 20s or 30s during the 1992 murders, with sandy blonde or reddish hair and lazy eyelids. An age-progressed composite released in 2021 suggests he would be between 52 and 70 years. Old today if still alive. An FBI profiler's assessment suggests the killer may have been based in Indianapolis, with the first victim, Robin Fuldauer, killed close to his home base, potentially turning the spree into a calculated game as he traveled westward. Beyond the 1992 spree, investigators suspect the I-70 killer may be responsible for additional murders, particularly in Texas during 1993 and 1994. These include the murders of Marianne Glasscock, 51, killed on September 25, 1993 in Fort Worth; Amy Vess, 22, shot to death on November 1, 1993 in Arlington; and the attempted murder of Vicki Webb, 35, who survived being shot on January 15, 1994 in Houston, when a bullet hit a large vertebra and the gun misfired. These Texas cases share similarities with the Midwest murders, such as the use of a .22 caliber firearm and the targeting of female store clerks. However, ballistics evidence doesn't match the 1992 murders, leading to divided opinions among investigators about whether they're connected. The 2001 murder of Billy Brossman, 31, in Terre Haute, just 7 blocks from a 1992 crime scene, also shows similarities, with security footage capturing a white male suspect, but no confirmed connection has been established. In 2021, a task force was formed involving police from Indianapolis, Wichita, Terre Haute, St. Charles, and Raytown, aiming to leverage advancements in technology and DNA analysis to finally identify the killer. A book titled Dead End: Inside the Hunt for the I-70 Serial Killer by Bob Cyphers was published recently, seeking to keep the case in the public eye and potentially generate new leads. Several theories exist regarding the killer's motives and identity. The small amounts of cash stolen suggest robbery was secondary, with the killings possibly driven by a hatred for women, given the victim profile. Some speculate the killer may have been a drifter or truck driver, given the interstate connection. Online discussions have suggested various possible suspects, though these remain unverified. The pause after 1992, followed by similar murders in Texas, raises questions about whether the killer moved, was incarcerated, or possibly died. As of April 2025, the case remains officially unsolved. If the I-70 killer is still alive, he would be in his 50s or 60s today. The lack of similar murders in recent years could indicate that he has ceased killing, is incarcerated for other crimes, or has died. However, without a definitive identification or capture, the possibility that that this predator remains at large, perhaps having evolved his methods to avoid detection, cannot be dismissed. The FBI believes modern technology, particularly DNA analysis, offers real potential for solving this cold case. However, the passage of time continues to complicate the investigation as witnesses' memories fade and evidence deteriorates. For the families of the victims and the communities terrorized by these crimes, the uncertainty about the killer's identity and whereabouts remains a source of ongoing fear and frustration. The Jeff Davis 8. Nestled in the bayous of Louisiana, Jefferson Davis Parish might seem like just another rural southern community, home to about 10,000 residents. But between 2005 and 2009, this small parish became the setting for a series of murders that continue to baffle authorities and haunt locals. 8 women, all connected through a web of sex work, drug use, and roles as police informants, were found dead in the swamps, canals, and alongside roads of this tight-knit community. Collectively, they became known as the Jeff Davis 8, or sometimes the Jennings 8, named after the parish's principal town. The victims, Loretta Chason, Ernestine Patterson, Kristen Gary Lopez, Whitney Dubois, Laconia Muggy Brown, Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno, Brittany Gary, and Nicole Guillory, shared striking similarities in their life circumstances. All were involved in sex work in the economically depressed region, and all had served as police informants, providing information about the local drug trade. These shared backgrounds placed them in precarious positions where their lives intersected with both criminal elements and law enforcement. The timeline of discoveries paints a disturbing picture of ongoing violence spanning 4 years. Loretta Chason, 28, became the first victim when her decomposed body was found in a canal on May 20, 2005, identifiable only through fingerprints. Less than a month later, on June 18, 2005, Ernestine Patterson, 30, was discovered with her throat slit in another canal south of Jennings. After a nearly 2-year pause, the killings resumed with Kristen Gary Lopez, 21, found on March 18, 2007, her throat also slit. Whitney Dubois, 26, connected to local pimp Frankie Richard, was discovered decomposed on May 12, 2007. The following year brought 3 more victims. Laconia Muggy Brown, 23, found with her throat slit on May 29, 2008. Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno, 24, discovered in a canal on September 11, 2008. And Brittany Gary, 17, the youngest victim and cousin of Kristen Gary Lopez, found decomposed on November 15, 2008. The final victim, Nicole Guillory, 26, was discovered on August 19, 2009. Her body dumped off Interstate 10. The victims' bodies were typically found in advanced states of decomposition, making it difficult for medical examiners to determine precise causes of death in many cases. The locations, isolated waterways and remote areas, suggested a killer or killers familiar with the local geography and confident in their ability to dispose of bodies without detection. Initially, law enforcement pursued the theory that these deaths were the work of a serial killer, leading to the formation of a task force comprising 14 federal, state, and local agencies in December 2008. However, investigative journalist Ethan Brown's book, Murder in the Bayou, presents a far more disturbing possibility that the murders weren't the work of a single predator, but rather the violent fallout of Jennings's interconnected sex and drug trade, with law enforcement potentially complicit in both the killings and their cover-up. Brown's investigation uncovered troubling allegations of police misconduct. Witness interviews implicated local law enforcement in evidence disposal, particularly in the Kristen Gary Lopez case, where 2 female inmates claim the sheriff's office acted at the behest of Frankie Richard, a central figure in the case. A sergeant was reportedly forced out due to misconduct allegations, but these claims were largely ignored by superiors. Further raising suspicions, a man named Warren Gary was accused of buying a truck specifically to discard evidence, and in 2009, a DNA swabbing of investigators took place, though the results were never publicly disclosed. Frankie Richard emerges as a key figure in this tangled web. A strip club owner and drug dealer, he admitted to having sexual relations with most of the victims and was reportedly the last person seen with Lopez before her disappearance. Despite making self-incriminating statements, charges against Richard and others, like Byron Chad Jones and Lawrence Nixon, were dropped due to issues with evidence, such as crime scenes being tested 15 months after the bodies were discovered, with no blood evidence found. The serial killer theory has been largely discredited by by Brown's investigation, which points instead to multiple perpetrators, operating within a corrupt system. The evidence increasingly suggests a nexus of police corruption, where informants were targeted for their knowledge, possibly linked to a 2005 police shooting of an unarmed drug dealer, Leonard Crochet, which victim Kristen Lopez reportedly witnessed. Multiple witnesses have suggested that police killed the women to silence them, a theory supported by Brown's findings. This controversy has eroded trust between the community and law enforcement, with families and advocacy groups like the Promise of Justice Initiative calling for federal intervention. In 2023, a sheriff candidate named Myers promised to reopen the cases and assign a dedicated cold case division to investigate. However, as of April 2025, no significant progress has been reported, leaving the community frustrated and families still seeking answers. The case has received extensive media coverage, including James Lee Burke's novels The Glass Rainbow, 2010, and Robichaux, 2018, which reference the murders. Podcasts like Behind the Yellow Tape, 2011, and The Casual Criminalist, 2021, and a Showtime docuseries titled Murder in the Bayou, 2019, based on Brown's book. Despite speculation, Nick Pizzolatto, creator of True Detective, has clarified that the case did not inspire Season 1, though similarities have been noted. As of April 30th, 2025, the Jeff Davis 8 murders remain officially unsolved, with no arrests or charges filed. Pedro Lopez, the Monster of the Andes. In the annals of serial murder, few cases are as staggering in scale or as frustrating in their lack of resolution as that of Pedro Alonso Lopez, known infamously as the Monster of the Andes. By his own admission, Lopez may be one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history, with claims of murdering over 300 young girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador during the 1970s and early 1980s. Most disturbing of all, despite his horrific confessions and convictions, Lopez may well be a free man today. Born on October 8, 1948, in Santa Isabel, Colombia, Lopez's life was marked by trauma and violence from the beginning. He was the seventh of 13 children, with his mother, Benilda Lopez de Castañeda, working as a laundry worker, though Lopez later claimed she was a sex worker. His father, Medardo Reyes, was killed 6 months before his birth during La Violencia, a period of civil conflict in Colombia. Lopez's childhood unraveled when, at the age of 8, he was banished from his home for attempting to molest his sister. This led to years of homelessness in Bogota, where he joined a gang, used drugs, and suffered further sexual abuse. At age 10, an American couple adopted him and enrolled him in an orphan school, but he fled at 12 after being molested by a teacher, highlighting the cycle of victimization that would later inform his own predatory behavior. Lopez's criminal activities began with auto theft, leading to his imprisonment in 1969 at age 21. During his incarceration, he was gang raped by other inmates, an event that allegedly triggered his violent retaliation. He killed 3 of his attackers with a makeshift knife, extending his sentence by 2 years. Released in 1978, Lopez embarked on what would become one of history's most horrific killing sprees. He targeted vulnerable young girls, particularly those from indigenous tribes or impoverished backgrounds. His modus operandi was methodical. He would follow children for days, lure them with pretty shining trinkets, and take them to remote areas where he raped and strangled them, often in daylight so he could see their eyes, which he described as a divine experience. In a particularly disturbing detail, he confessed to holding tea parties with the corpses, indicating a ritualistic component to his crimes. Lopez's capture finally came in March 1980 in Ambato, Ecuador, after a vendor named Carlina Ramon and her peers thwarted his attempt to abduct her daughter. During interrogation, with investigator Pastor Cordova Gudino going undercover, Lopez confessed to over 300 murders, more than 200 in Ecuador, tens in Peru, and many in Colombia. He led authorities to 53 graves, some reports cite 57, providing undeniable evidence of at least some of his crimes. His earlier activities in Peru were particularly revealing. He claimed to have started killing there by 1978, estimating over 100 victims before being caught by the indigenous Ayachucos tribe, who nearly buried him alive. An American missionary intervened, and Lopez was deported to Ecuador without charges, a missed opportunity that allowed his killing spree to continue. On January 25, 1981, Lopez was convicted of 57 murders in Ecuador, though he pled guilty to 110 in total. Diagnosed as a sociopath, he received a sentence of just 16 years, the maximum under Ecuadorian law at the time, which did not allow consecutive sentences. This punishment, grossly disproportionate to his crimes, set the stage for perhaps the most disturbing chapter of this case. After serving only 14 years, Lopez was released on August 31, 1994, for good behavior. He was immediately rearrested as an illegal immigrant and extradited to Colombia, where he faced charges for a 20-year-old murder. But the Colombian justice system's handling of this notorious killer would prove equally baffling. In 1995, Colombian authorities declared Lopez insane and held him in a psychiatric hospital in Bogotá. Just 3 years later, in February 1998, he was declared sane and released on a mere $50 bail with minimal stipulations. After briefly visiting his mother, during which he reportedly sold her bed and chair, he vanished. His last confirmed sighting was in September 1999 at the National Civil Registry in Colombia, where he appeared to renew his citizenship card. Since then, Lopez's whereabouts have remained unknown, with speculation that he may have been killed by victims' families or is still at large. In 2002, the Colombian National Police and Interpol issued warrants for his arrest in connection with a fresh murder bearing similarities to his previous crimes, but these warrants were deactivated in 2005. In 2012, he was named a possible suspect in a homicide in Tunja, Colombia, but no confirmation of his involvement was ever established. As of April 30th, 2025, there have been no official sightings or captures reported, leaving one of history's most prolific confessed serial killers potentially free. If alive today, Pedro Lopez would be 76 years old. Collins Jumaisi Kalusha, the vampire.
The suspect confessed to have lured, killed, and disposed 42 female bodies at the dumping site.
In July 2024, a case emerged from Kenya that shocked the world with its scale and brutality. Collins Jumaisi Kalusha, a 33-year-old Kenyan man nicknamed the Vampire by detectives, was arrested and accused of murdering 42 women between 2022 and July 2024. The case drew international attention when authorities discovered dismembered bodies at a quarry in Nairobi's Mukuru slums, a site used for dumping local waste. According to official reports, Kalusha allegedly confessed to luring, killing, and disposing of these women over a 2-year period. His first victim was reportedly his wife, Imelda Kalenya, killed in 2022, with the most recent murder occurring on July 11, 2024, just days before his arrest. The method described was gruesome. Victims were lured, murdered, and their bodies dismembered before being packed into sacks and dumped at the quarry. Forensic analysis revealed disturbing details. Most bags contained severed limbs and torsos, with only one body found intact. No bullet wounds were evident on the victims, and DNA testing reportedly identified 2 of the deceased. This grim discovery led Kenyan prosecutors to describe Kalusha as a psychopathic serial killer with no respect for human life. Kalusha was arrested around 3 a.m. on July 15, 2024, near a Nairobi bar where he had been watching the Euro 2024 football finals, according to Acting Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja. During a search of his home, police recovered numerous items of evidence, including 24 SIM cards, 1 laptop, 1 hard drive, 2 flash drives, 1 machete, 12 nylon sacks, 8 ID cards, and 2 female undergarments. However, the case quickly became surrounded by controversy and doubt. Shortly after his initial confession, Kalusha disowned his statements, claiming he had been severely tortured during interrogation. Social media posts from July 16, 2024, reported that Kalusha had proclaimed his innocence in court, alleging that his confession was coerced through torture. The timing of the case raised further questions. Kenyans questioned how the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, had arrested Kalusha within 72 hours before autopsies were completed, especially when compared to other high-profile unsolved cases like the Kianjakoma brothers and Rita Waney. The arrest occurred during a period of anti-government protests and allegations of police brutality, leading some to suggest that the bodies might be linked to disappearances during these protests rather than the work of a serial killer. Additional inconsistencies emerged. Kalusha's residence was claimed to be 100 meters from the crime scene, yet locals said his face was unfamiliar, questioning how he could have committed 42 murders in the area without being noticed. The body of his alleged first victim, his wife, remains undiscovered, and her mother only recorded a statement after Kalusha's arrest, raising questions about earlier investigations. But the most dramatic development came on August 20, 2024, when Kalusha escaped from a Nairobi police station, along with 12 other inmates, all Eritrean nationals. According to reports, they cut through wire mesh and scaled the perimeter wall. National Police Chief Gilbert Mafia Passanjali stated that the escape was aided by insiders, leading to the suspension and custody of 8 officers. The CEO, inconsistencies in the official narrative, the convenient timing of the arrest during anti-government protests, the extraordinarily quick resolution of the case compared to other murders, and the suspicious circumstances of Kalusha's escape all raise legitimate questions about the true nature of these crimes. What remains undisputed is that human remains were discovered in Nairobi's Mukuru slums, and that families across Kenya are missing loved ones. Whether these deaths were the work of a single serial killer, multiple killers, or possibly even state actors, the victims deserve justice and the public deserves the truth. If you enjoyed this video, click on the boxes playing on your screen to watch similar content if you enjoyed this video.